Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the Wednesday session of MS&T, where we have a special opportunity to have a town hall meeting of the three professional societies to discuss participation in the material science and engineering profession. I'm Beth Dickey. I'm currently the president-elect of the American Ceramic Society, and I'm pleased and really honored to be able to host this town hall meeting. This event is really intended to help us as a profession frame the challenges and opportunities that we have to embrace and benefit from a diverse workforce. And while diversity has many facets, today's discussion will largely focus on the persistent and underrepresentation of racial and ethnic minorities in material science and engineering. We have a wonderful group of speakers and panelists who have taken the time to join us today and to give us some of their thoughts and reflection on this important issue. And we will have an opportunity to ask this panel questions as we go through the town hall meeting today. So you will have the ability to type in chat questions into the question and answer text box that we will be curating and having a discussion about those questions with the panelists. So I'd like to thank the organizers of MS&T and all three of the societies, the American Ceramic Society, TMS, and ASIT, for really putting a lot of effort and enthusiasm behind this event. I'd also like to thank all of you, the MS&T participants, for participating in this discussion. So let's first kick this event off with our keynote speech. And we're very fortunate to have with us Dr. Carl Reed, who's the current executive director of the Society of Black Engineers. I hope you'll take the time to read his whole bio, which is on the MS&T website under this event. And I think you'll really appreciate the journey that he's taken and really his dedication to this topic through his professional career. Carl has a bachelor's and an MS actually in material science and engineering from MIT. And he first actually became involved in NSBE at MIT. He then worked in industry for 12 years and then decided to do a pivot and obtained his doctorate of education from Harvard University, and then pursued a career that's really been dedicated to diversity and inclusion within the STEM disciplines. Before joining NSBE, he was the senior vice president of the United Negro College Fund, and since the NSBE, he's been involved in a number of major efforts and has most recently been a founding member of the 50K Coalition, which is a national effort that intends to produce 50,000 students of diversity in STEM by 2025. So it's my honor to introduce Dr. Carl Reed as our keynote speaker.
I'm very excited to join the MS&T 2020 meeting and to share my thoughts about diversity, equity, and inclusion.
You know, when Elizabeth Dickey invited me to give this talk, how could I say no? Material science, after all, is my home discipline where I cut my engineering teeth, as it were. And though that was 35 years ago that I earned a degree and I no longer practice this discipline, I'm indebted to my faculty and peers at MIT for giving me confidence in my intellect, and most importantly, for training me how to think critically, reason analytically, and problem solve persistently. So the title of this brief talk, The Elements of Inclusion, like what I did there, The Elements of Inclusion, Strategies for Increasing Diversity in Material Science and Engineering. And to be honest with you, in full disclosure, I'll spend more time talking about the elements of inclusion and then offer you resources at the end that could provide the strategy component for moving us toward a more equitable discipline. So one of the things I'll do is just kind of share my screen with you to offer my thoughts on kind of what we're going to cover, what I'm going to cover in this brief talk today. So I'm going to start off with an introduction to NSBE and my organization, as well as the 50K Coalition, which is a national movement to increase the diversity of engineering from various groups. I'm going to then touch on some of the challenges, but go really deep into this whole notion of diversity and inclusion and why that matters. And then I'm going to introduce a model, what we're calling in NSBE an inclusivity model, that really approaches this whole notion of diversity, equity, and inclusion as a system, like engineers do, and then offer some partnership opportunities in this new normal. So NSBE is founded in 1975 by 6 students who were attending Purdue University, all of whom were from the south side of Chicago. And they were very successful, along with the university, of turning around an 80% attrition rate of African-American engineering students in 1971 to a 60% graduation rate by 1975. And they wanted to share that with other universities. And so 34 colleges and universities send their Black students to West Lafayette, Indiana in the spring of 1975. And what was the Society of Black Engineers at Purdue became the National Society of Black Engineers. And now you could see we're just under 22,000 global members. Our mission is to increase the number of culturally responsible Black engineers who excel academically, succeed professionally, and positively impact the community. And that speaks to all 3 constituencies. Our NSBE junior population, 3rd grade to 12th grade, in 225 chapters. Our collegiate, which is the heart of our organization and continues to provide the governance. So NSBE is one of the largest student governed societies based in the United States. And then our professionals, over 4,000 professionals, located in about 90 chapters around the world, mostly in cities and within companies. As you can see, the disciplinary breakdowns of our members, material science and engineering and the related fields don't even show up, unfortunately. And it's something that we need to do to promote this discipline. And like I discovered it, the discipline in the summer after my senior year, I think that there are opportunities to really advance the field by promoting it and making more young people aware of the discipline. The only other thing I'll point out on this slide is that 33% of our members identify as female. And though we do better than the national average, which is about 20 to 21% of all degrees, bachelor's degrees awarded, we've got a long way to go to get to our goal of parity across the board. And we've got some activities and strategies to do that as well. In 2016, we partnered with the Society of Women Engineers, the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, and American Indian Science and Engineering Society to form the 50K Coalition. It is a national effort using collective impact to produce 50,000 diverse engineers annually by 2025. The effort there is using this effort to kind of transform systems. Collective impact is used to solve complex social problems, working together with common agenda, common shared measurement metrics, and mutually reinforcing activities to achieve that. We invite members of MS&T to join the 50K Coalition, institutional members to join, to work with us to advance our objective to change the face of engineering. Our goal is to get to 250 members in the next 5 years, institutional members, and therefore have a dramatic effect on how engineering looks in the United States and beyond. So why is all this important? Well, a lot of our efforts have been up to this point, like NSBE and even the 50K, is really around diversity, increasing the pathways or the pipeline of young people who are interested in pursuing engineering. A lot of broadening participation in engineering is focused on this diversity, increasing the numbers. Diversity is the first element of inclusion that I'll talk about momentarily. And you think about our discipline is born out of the intersection of multiple other disciplines like physics and chemistry and engineering and others. And that's really what got me excited. The idea of combining elements to form new molecules with different physical properties was fascinating to me. And I was unfortunately in a high school that I did not take chemistry. I had all my science requirements satisfied by computer science and electronics. And it wasn't until I was in a summer program at MIT that I discovered chemistry and ultimately decided to pursue material science and engineering. This fascinated me. But the takeaway here is material science in and of itself was born out of the intersection of multiple disciplines. When I talk about the intersection, I'll talk about this as the power of diversity, that intersections create new concepts and new ideas and give birth to those ideas, which is why diversity matters. Again, the first element in inclusion. In Franz Johansson's book, the Medici Effect, the Medici family was the family behind the Italian Renaissance. It kind of brought together different cultures to kind of give birth to a new way of thinking and new arts, a new culture worldwide, and affected us worldwide. He brought this whole notion of the Medici Effect to say that innovation occurs at the intersection. And team diversity allows different viewpoints and approaches and frames of mind to emerge. We bring different perspectives to challenge to new complex problems, and it challenges us to escape our imposed viewpoints. I'm going to come back to this whole notion of our implicit biases and unconscious biases. Our diverse teams have far more pathways from which to draw in order to bring about solutions and complex solutions. And the best chance of coming up with great new ideas is when we mix these perspectives and fields, cultures, and backgrounds together. So again, innovation occurs at the intersection. In fact, one of my favorite studies that was done and published in 2018 by the Boston Consulting Group looks at 1,700 companies from all around the world and discovered that those companies that have above average diversity on their management teams report higher innovation revenues. That is, revenues produced by products and services within a 3-year period by 19 percentage points. And their earnings are higher, as well as they noted that when there is more diversity, the effect is additive. So when you look at gender, when you look at ethnicity, it adds the impact on the diversity and association on diversity. And that's a powerful notion when you're thinking about the power of diversity and why diversity matters. So why are they smarter? They focus more on the facts. They process facts more carefully, and diverse teams are much more innovative because we avoid pitfalls of conformity. This whole notion of confirmation bias, right? Which is a tendency to be very convergent in thinking. When you have diverse teams, it forces you to diverge your thoughts and perspectives, and then bring new perspectives into converging of overall solutions. But diversity is not equity. And I think this cartoon really kind of shows the difference. When we talk about equity, we're talking about not necessarily equal inputs, but equal outputs. In other words, creating an environment to ensure that people have what they need from their backgrounds and experiences and expertise and knowledge, et cetera, to produce common outcomes. That's the goal of equity versus equality, which is equal inputs. But as you could see from the left, even equality doesn't necessarily produce the results we need. What we're trying to get to is a notion of equity. And I think that for us, especially after the George Floyd murder on May 25th and the subsequent reckoning around race, the conversations about racial equity and workplace equity is a powerful conversation that we all need to have. And I'll introduce a model for how we can operationalize this in our organizations later. The other thing is diversity is not inclusion. And so when I talk about the elements of diversity, I'll make the case that equity is an element of diversity. Inclusion. Diversity is an element of inclusion, but diversity is not inclusion. And we throw these terms around, D&I, DEI, et cetera, DIB in terms of belonging, et cetera. And really the point I want to make here is that hiring diverse talent isn't enough, or admitting, enrolling diverse student body, or hiring diverse faculty or staff is not enough, because it's the experience they have in the workplace, the climate in the workplace is key to success. Now, why is that the case? Well, I love the definitions that Robert Sellers, at the Chief Diversity Officer at University of Michigan, kind of shared with the DEI Council at the University of Michigan, on which I sit. He said, diversity is being invited to the party. Equity is when everyone gets a dance, but inclusion is when everyone contributes to the playlist. The playlist speaks to the culture, the climate, the sense of belonging that you get from that experience. So it's not sufficient just to be diverse. It's not sufficient to just allow people to give them the opportunity to dance. If the music is not right, we don't feel a sense of belonging, and you won't get your best selves, as it were, in the workplace. So inclusion is the optimal state. So back to that little cartoon where you got the three people standing behind the fence. And we say that that's equity, providing equal differential inputs in order to produce the equal outputs. But really, inclusion is that we're not standing behind the fence at all. We're actually in the game. We're playing the game. We're part of that game. And I love the definition that the Kirwan Institute mentions. It requires the simultaneous experience of feeling valued for your uniqueness and having a sense of belonging on your team. In other words, you are being evaluated, you are being valued as an individual, not as a person of color, not as a person, not as a woman, not as a person who is differently abled, not as an LGBT, but you are feeling valued for your uniqueness as a person, and you have a sense of belonging. And that's, to me, what inclusion, and that's a goal. That's what we're trying to get to. Why is this inclusion that it's so very important? We all carry biases, right? The Kirwan Institute calls implicit bias, or unconscious bias, that we carry, the equal opportunity virus. And like coronavirus, right? It's an equal opportunity virus. Although there's another story about that that I won't go into. When we have implicit bias, that's just not enough. It doesn't just stay in our head. It affects our action. It affects our decisions in an unconscious manner. In fact, what the Kirwan Institute says, that only 2% of our cognition is available consciously. In other words, 98% of the time, we have a stimulus, we have an emotional response to that stimulus, whether it's a threat or a belief that there's a threat, and then we respond accordingly 98% of the time without being aware of why we're responding, what we're doing. The goal of implicit bias training is to separate that stimulus from that response. From a systems one thinking, what Daniel Kahneman talks about, where you just you respond quickly, reflexively, to a systems two thinking, where you have a chance to reflect on why you're reacting the way you are, why you're behaving the way you are, and ensuring that your behavior is equitable to the situation or to the individuals. That's the goal. Now, the research says that the only way to get to mitigating implicit bias, and therefore creating an inclusive environment, is if we have meaningful interactions. And so this is the elements of our inclusion. Our goal is inclusion, right? That's the end in and of itself. Stephen Covey says, begin with the end in mind. Creating inclusive cultures where people feel a sense of belonging is key. As I mentioned, diversity is key to that. The intersections of different cultures and beliefs and thought processes, and et cetera, coming together creates a birthplace of new ideas. But I talk about the intersection. I'm going to come back to that because that's key. That, to me, is the catalyst. And equity, creating differential inputs towards achieving equal opportunity. No amount of diversity can overcome inequalities as well. So you've got to have diversity plus inequity. And I make the case that the catalyst toward bringing this to class are meaningful interactions. You can't just have diversity without having the meaningful interactions, the connections between the multiple elements in the equation toward getting to inclusion. So one example of how we kind of try to de-bias against the systems one thinking is the natural tendency to gravitate toward people who are like us, right? We have a natural tendency, a limbic human response to gravitate toward this as part of our self-preservation as human beings. And we have to kind of recognize when that's the case and separate that thinking to ensure that we're thinking about people based on their abilities, based on their uniqueness, and not based on the fact that I tend to gravitate toward this favorable self-association, as Brett Pelham talks about, or homophily, as some of the researchers talk about. So we want to separate that tendency in terms of who we hire, who we enroll, who we admit to graduate school, et cetera, and break up that thinking as well. And so the key to mitigating bias and creating this inclusive are these meaningful interactions, as I mentioned earlier. So I'm going to finish up with this kind of framework because we're engineers and we like to approach things as a kind of systems approach, right? It was Deming who said, every system is perfectly designed to produce the results it gets. So in order to change the results, right, we have to change the system. And so approaching this from a systemic standpoint is the way to address this and create more inclusive environment. That means looking at diversity, representative parity of Blacks at all levels of the organization, making sure that wherever you're located, the communities in which you're located, your institution is located, where your university, your company is located, has representative parity of Blacks and other people of color, women, et cetera, at all levels, including not just the entry level, but the board of directors. There's been some really good studies on McKinsey looking at the diversity of board of directors and Association of Financial Returns. Second is equity. And that's kind of auditing my policies and procedures to kind of extract where there are systemic inequities, but also looking at the data, right, on employment, looking at whether or not faculty are getting equal lab space or pursuing funding or getting paid equitably, looking at the ratio of HR complaints by different groups, departures and termination, just looking at the data, identifying where there are gaps and working to close those gaps. As I mentioned, inclusion is the goal. It is the playlist. It is the culture. Ensuring that the institutional culture is put in place where there are climate surveys being done so that you understand how people are experiencing the climate, but also making sure that there are mandatory trainings on microaggressions and implicit and explicit bias, as well as pushing the conversation around not just being a non-racist, but being an anti-racist culture is a proactive approach to eliminate Black racism and other forms of inequity. Ecosystems, looking at the overall community, looking at the supplier network and the subcontractors, looking at the philanthropy and making sure corporate responsibility is pooled and targeted to eliminate inequities in the broader ecosystems, looking at your policy agenda to ensure that you're eliminating barriers, working to eliminate barriers systematically rather than just in your communities or even in your sector. And then, of course, making data available. We're partnering with an organization called Canaries, Kanarys, to make data available about companies and their DEI value proposition, so that our members can make decisions in addition to employee benefits and location and quality. They can make decisions on the culture, the playlist, whether or not they feel that they can contribute to the playlist as well. The end of the day, the question is, how can we partner, right? As an organization, how can we partner with NSBE? How can we partner with the 50K Coalition? And so I've looked at that inclusivity model and kind of extract the three areas that we could focus on. One, on the terms of diversity, partner with us on conference recruiting. Our conventions, when we have them in person, have total about 14,000 participants. So there are huge opportunities to connect with us, to recruit talented young people, our online career center, or our integrated pipeline programs where you have an opportunity to develop relationships with students as early as their sophomore year. And then we ask that you join the 50K Coalition, not just as a financial contributor, but to contribute your programs to broaden the participation, increase the number of Black, Latino, female, Native American engineers who are earning degrees in the United States. If your company or your association has Black employees who are engineers, encourage them to join the NSBE Professionals Organization. It is a retention strategy, but also partnering with the African American Employee Resource Group. If you don't have an employee resource group, I encourage you to put forward one. It's an affinity group that allows your African American and other people of color and other groups to come together as an affinity. It's a great retention strategy. And then having your executives participate in NSBE activities and NSBE conferences. We actually invite them to come speak and lead webinars, et cetera, in the organization. And in terms of ecosystems, help us scale up these programs. SHIP, SWE, ACES, and NSBE, we all have pre-college programs, and the only limitation is scale. We've reached 25,000 third to fifth graders in our summer engineering experience for kids since 2007 in nearly 30 communities around the country. And the only thing that limits us to reach the 650,000 African-American 8-year-olds in the United States is really scale. And many of your organizations know how to get to scale. We know we have the content, the subject matter expert partnering with us enables us to get to scale and truly change the face of engineering in the United States. Here are some very useful resources. The Kirwan Institute, I mentioned a couple of times in the course of this presentation. They produce an implicit bias review every year with a focus on different area. I recommend that. The implicit association test allows you to go online and test your own bias about race and about gender and about religion and about other points of view to kind of assess yours. When I did this 20 years ago, I was surprised to find out that I had a bias against Black people. And I had to work through my system 1, system 2 thinking in that process because I'm part of this culture that values one group and denigrates others. Day-to-day experiences of emotional attacks is produced by Catalyst. I recommend that for women of color and for men of color in the workplace and women in general. And then we partnered with SWE, the Society of Women Engineers, and WEPAN on this Ignored Potential, which is a collaborative roadmap for increasing African-American women in engineering. And finally, if you're at a university and you're looking for ways to really turn the curve and really kind of improve the success of underrepresented students in engineering, we recommend a student retention toolkit. We partnered with the American Society for Engineering Education and Purdue University Engineering Education to produce the toolkit and the elements that go into that toolkit. It's available on Amazon. I encourage you to take a look at that. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much. Our website, nsbe.org, we also have a social justice website that has resources and videos and town hall meetings and discussions about racial trauma. And if you really want to learn and understand in your privacy of your own home or your institution, I recommend that you take a look at what we've produced at that website so that you can learn so much more about the work that we're doing and ways to improve the success of your environment and produce a much more inclusive organization and much more inclusive discipline. Thank you so very much for your time. I look forward to continuing the conversation in the panel that follows.
A really informative and inspirational talk. And I appreciate, and I think all of the 3 organizations appreciate your what you've done with your career and your willingness to engage with us in this conversation. So I think what we're going to do now is take a little bit of time, and Carl's going to answer a few questions before we move on to the second talk. And so Carl, I'll just pull out a couple of questions that, and if I don't ask yours right away, for those that you have asked questions, they'll come up in the panel discussion. Carl, one question first, it's a thanks for a fantastic presentation. And this is, you may have touched on these a little bit, but can you elaborate on mentoring programs that NSBE may have, where the younger members can take advantages of the experience, knowledge, and advice of mid to late career members, so that they can help mentor them through their career?
Yes, and thank you. And once again, thank you for this opportunity to address the conference, and Elizabeth, for your gracious invitation as well. A lot of one of the things we discovered, and it was a study was done on one of the NSBE chapters, was that if you are an African American member of the National Society of Black Engineers, part of a chapter, you are 10 times as likely to graduate than if you are an African American who is majoring in engineering who's not part of the organization. And this was one campus study that was done, and it was largely because of this ecosystem that's created. So it's very natural, and I'm a product of the organization. I was a chapter member at MIT. I became a national chair eventually, and it was just this whole notion of what the late Chuck Vest, president of MIT, calls the lift as you climb kind of mentality. That there's this built-in kind of sense, and you'll hear this from Olivia and Ship and others, that we can't get there ourselves. We've got to kind of reach down and support others as well. And we all know that mentoring matters. And one of the reasons it matters, in fact, my research looked at the success of certain students in college, is because hearing someone who you trust, who can say, what I call the Home Depot effect, right? You can do it, we can help, has a powerful motivating effect on pursuit, on persistence, on resilience, et cetera, et cetera. So we have mentoring built into the organization. Our NSBE junior chapters have advisors who mentor. Our collegiate chapters reach down to the NSBE junior chapters, and our professionals serve as advisors as well. And I don't want to just limit that answer to NSBE, but that's got to be built into all other organizations. The employee resource groups and others typically have executive sponsors, and they effectively become sort of mentors and support for up and coming African American, Latino veterans, et cetera, in that group. So yeah, mentoring is so very powerful, and it has to be intentional.
Okay. Thank you, Carl. And I do want to mention that the recording of this town hall will be available after the event. And so we'll also make available all the links and resources that Carl provided, because that's really one of the objectives of this town hall. I think probably most of the people participating want to be doing something, and we are trying to give people the information and resources so that they can use the most effective practices and those that have been studied and are known to be best practices. So thank you for providing those resources, and we will make them available to the community. So let me do another question that's come in for you, Carl. And this is, how can an organization promote diversity in its social media or perhaps other forms while avoiding overt or perceived tokenism in that representation?
That's a powerful, that's a great question, as was the first as well. I would say that the organization should be authentic about who they are. So first of all, just be authentic about the representation. So as I mentioned, diversity is just about representation. Equity and inclusion are other components there. And so try not to be what you're not, because most people can kind of uncover that right away. And the students and others who are pursuing those jobs will know. We're all in the habit of getting onto Amazon and other companies and writing reviews now. Well, there are online reviews about DEI that Canaries and other organizations are doing. So just be authentic, but be aspirational. Target the efforts underway that an organization is pursuing in order to be more equitable, more inclusive. Is diversity in your mission statement? Is inclusion in your mission statement? Make sure that those things are visible without trying to be what you're not. You know, I'm in the higher education space quite a bit, and oftentimes I pull up a website and you see Black students who are on campus, or Latinx students and others, and then you pull up the College Navigator, you know, barely 1% are African American. That's not authentic. Being authentic in who you are and being aspirational, I think, are the key parts of strategy, until you can get to the point where you have the representation, then can share it with the larger audiences.
So, Carl, one of the points that you brought up is having a dashboard, and you know, we're in an audience of scientists and engineers who are very data mindful and driven. Can you talk a little bit more about the importance of those quantitative metrics and minding those? Yes,
starting off with again, beginning with the end in mind. So inclusion. And I'm working with a couple of universities around their climate surveys, and many companies also have, and Canaries also has an engagement or climate survey. So surveying the employees on their experiences on campus is key, and making sure those data are available so that as a benchmark, so that you can measure the progress that's made. One university did their climate survey and found their female, the women faculty felt a culture of harassment on campus, and it was just a revelation for the dean, but it wasn't a revelation for the faculty members. And so just making sure those data are available, but also looking at, as I mentioned earlier, look at the employee statistics. So how are we doing on hiring, promotion, compensation, bonus structures, etc., by race and ethnicity? There's a term that many people are using called intersectionality. So just looking at African Americans is not enough. African American women have a different experience than white women. So just looking at women is just not enough. Being able to kind of parse the data and look at those data, it's there. And I think it was Peter Drucker who said this: you can't manage what you can't measure. So much like we have dashboards for our KPIs and others, we've got to include this into our KPIs so that we can measure our success. And then the other thing, Elizabeth, is tying those to performance evaluations as well, so that you're setting goals based on how we're doing on moving the benchmarks on DEI metrics. It aligns behaviors to those goals and aligns the values and the organizations to those larger goals as well.
Okay, great. Mm-hmm. I'm going to maybe do one more question. It's a little bit general, and maybe we'll pick back up on this topic during the panel discussion, but it's states that culture is the way a group of people think and act through shared experiences. How might we create and foster these positive experiences of inclusion? So, words of wisdom.
I love that question. I mean, and I'm embarrassed to say, as an engineer, I didn't discover sociology until I got into graduate school. I'm not my master's at MIT in material science. I mean, like my doctoral program at the Ed School at Harvard. And I love it because you're right. Our culture is really our behaviors, our attitudes, our values, and how we interact with one another, our norms, right? And so understanding that, and in fact, it's kind of interesting. I work for a CEO of an association who actually said this in a cabinet meeting. We don't have a culture here. And all of us looked at each other and said, of course we have a culture. But because he's the CEO, he defined the culture. And it's like the metaphor of the goldfish swimming in the fishbowl, and another goldfish comes up and says, hey guys and gals, how's the water? And swims away. And the other two goldfish look at each other and say, what the heck is water? Right? Because we're in the environment, we're immersed in the environment, it really becomes what is novel becomes normal. So you really have to have an intentionality about creating a culture that leads to behaviors. And the first step in all of this is understanding what are the values you want to reinforce and articulating those and setting those as goals, and then working toward achieving them and measuring them with the climate or the culture survey.
Thank you. Thank you, Carl.
Sure.
So I think we've got lots of other great questions. I'm going to save those because you're going to be joining us for the panel discussion. So I want to thank you again for a very wonderful talk and discussion, and we'll see you a little bit later in the program.
Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Okay. I'd now like to introduce our second speaker in the program, who's going to give us an address from the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers. Olivia Greve is a professor in the Department of Mechanical and Aerospace Engineering at the University of California, San Diego. Again, I hope that you'll look at her whole biography on the MS&T website. It's quite impressive. I'll just make a few points about Olivia's experience and she in her current activities as a faculty member at UC San Diego. She's currently the director of the Cali Baja Center for Resilient Materials and Systems and the faculty director of the IDEA Engineering Student Center. She most recently won the prestigious Presidential Award for Excellence in Science, Mathematics, and Engineering Mentoring. So going back to the previous conversation on really the importance of mentoring, and I'd like to give a personal shout out to Olivia for all of the work that she's done in that space. As well, she's been inducted into the Tijuana Walk of Fame, the Mexican Academy of Engineering, and the Mexican Academy of Sciences. She's a fellow of the American Ceramic Society, and she was named by Forbes magazine as one of the 100 most powerful women of Mexico. So Olivia, thank you as well for joining us today, and we look forward to your comments on behalf of SHIP.
Thank you, Beth, for that introduction. Much appreciate this invitation. Much appreciate the opportunity to speak to this community, which is really my community. I've been a member of the American Ceramic Society since 1997 when I was a graduate student. But now today, I'm actually going to be talking about SHIP, the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, for which I have been a member since 1990, actually, for 30 years when I entered college. This connection has really defined me as a student and as a working professional. It is the one place where I have found community. SHIP has provided me learning opportunities that have allowed me to better understand the struggles of minorities in the US, eventually resulting in the binational cross-border programs I have established and now lead. Programs that teach that there is no wall between us, that we are community, and that we can live and work and grow together, that we have common goals. Among a variety of efforts to promote binational collaborations, I have started and direct a large high school and undergraduate summer research program that serves students from the US and Mexico called Enlace. The students are placed in laboratories from across UC San Diego in pairs, one student from each side of the border. with the goal of forming binational friendships. Every summer, I tell the students in Enlace, among you is the future president of Mexico, let's call her Maria, and the future president of the US, a young Michelle Obama. And you have known each other since you were 17 years old. That destroys borders. That brings down walls because friendships made at a young age build trust. They are based on the fact that you like each other, not on any complications that arise when we become adults. They are the purest, most honest friendships one will ever have. And that's so powerful. In Enlace, we are building something based on that concept. We are building honest friendships. I can confirm that Chip helped me build those honest friendships. It is not a pipe dream. It happened to me. Organizations like Chip and Nesby do this for students of color. That's why they are so important on college campuses. And so at the end of every summer, when I send the students home, I am aware that I will miss them because I saw them grow. I saw them become better versions of themselves, and I saw them become friends. They go home and take with them a piece of my heart, the best part. Hopefully you can recognize that I have a passion for promoting not only STEM careers, but compassionate people that connect with each other. A big message to the students is to learn from others, the better ones among us. For me, there are two, Cesar Chavez and Eleanor Roosevelt. The great Eleanor Roosevelt used to say, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. That's right. As minorities, sometimes we need to be reminded of this. From Eleanor, from my own great mother, and from Chip, I learned the importance of contribution and service to others, commitment to living with integrity, and generosity. I have these expectations of my students, and I have hope. Hope that we can build something extraordinary with kindness, compassion, and respect for others. Hope that we will eliminate borders and bring down walls. I also have hope that we will make the right choices. I have hope that we will see beyond the divisive rhetoric so pervasive in our current political climate. And I have hope that we will change the world. SHIP has made a commitment to these precepts since its founding in 1973, and it continues to impact thousands of students with programs for K-12, undergraduate and graduate, and for professionals. But we can't do it alone. During summer 2018, I had a Holocaust survivor as a guest speaker for the Enlace program. What was amazing about her talk was the fact that among all the horrors she experienced at the Auschwitz concentration camp, she came to believe in the little everyday miracles that somehow kept her alive. And she came to believe in the goodness of people in spite of all the inhumanity. She had hope and she had courage. The fact is that we have great challenges ahead for us. Let us not go the route of division and hate. We know where that ends. It's great to see the interest and the commitment of the MS&T organizing societies in the ideals of equity and inclusion. I am convinced we can work together and build community like the community I strive to build for Enlace, but even better. One concern I continue to have is the low number of Latino engineering faculty in the United States. You can see the numbers here. On the left-hand side is a graph of the totals and then divided by gender for men and for women. So it's 587 in total based on 2018 statistics, which I am now updating for an update publication. This data that you have here was published in the MRS Bulletin in 2018, so you can find it in the reference, the citation is given there at the top. Men, it's 83%, as you can see, and it's also divided by rank of assistant, associate, and full professor. And then women, it's 17%. The numbers are dire indeed. What's really interesting to me also is that if you look at the country of origin for all this Latino engineering faculty, approximately 90% of them are immigrants. That's what made this country great. And so if you then think about the counterpart of 90% being immigrants, that means that only 10% of the Latino engineering faculty in the US were born and raised in this country. That has additional implications. It means that we are not educating Latinx students to become the next academics, to become the next engineering professors that can educate the next generation. And so that's a problem we need to solve. You can also see in this bar graph at the top that fully 25% of the total of Latino engineering faculty in the US, 1/4 of the total, comes from Mexico. So you see, Mexico does not import thieves and rapists. Mexico imports top academic talent, and Mexico is having an outsized impact on engineering education in the United States because of these numbers. I happen to be one of those 25% because I was born and raised in Tijuana, so that's my home. And I guess I feel that that there's value in being both an immigrant and somebody that is now a US person that's contributing to the concept of both sides of the border. And so if I think further about the concept of all of these Latino engineering faculty, the question is, how can we build a community, a society that can fix the pipeline issues facing minorities? I don't have easy answers, no one does, but I'm certain that it can only be accomplished if we come together. The message then is, let us face up and eliminate systemic racism. Let us face up and destroy walls. Let us face up and do good. As Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high. I leave you with a favorite message from Mother Teresa. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Do good anyway. So let's do good. Let's come together. Very grateful for your attention and look forward to future discussions.
Thank you, Olivia. Very moving and inspirational talk. We are so fortunate to have you in our community and really helping champion these efforts. Thank you so much. What I'd like to do now, Olivia is going to be joining us for the panel discussion, and I'm going to introduce our 3 other panelists who are have joined us today. So the next panelist that I'd like to introduce is Keith Bowen, who is currently the Dean of the College of Engineering and Information Technology at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Keith, please take a few moments to introduce yourself to this group.
Bowman, and I'm honored to be part of this panel. You can find detailed information on my academic and professional background on LinkedIn. My pronouns are he, him, his. I grew up in Ohio with a first-generation college father who was a foundry metallurgist at Ford's Cleveland casting plant. And I had a mom with a high school education. My uncle had a PhD in metallurgy and was actually an executive at National Steel. I'm a white gay man who was closeted until he was 43 years old when I was working as a faculty member in the Purdue School of Materials Engineering. I believed when I was ready to come out that I would be supported by the material science and engineering community, and especially by the incredible people that make up the American Ceramic Society. I just had to be ready. But realizing that I was the first openly gay full professor in Purdue Engineering and the first openly gay engineering school head was daunting. Since then, I've been the first openly gay person in every one of my leadership roles. After 2 decades at Purdue School of Materials Engineering, I sought roles and contexts where I could make a difference broadly in making engineering more inclusive. Currently, I am Dean of Engineering and Information Technology at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, UMBC, the first public research university in Maryland that was founded as an integrated institution. At UMBC, I work closely with one of the longest serving and I think the best university presidents in the US, Freeman Hrabowski III. Dr. Hrabowski is well known for his commitment and visible advocacy for social justice and inclusive excellence. Since 2000, I have led or co-led 7 projects on engineering and computing education research, with most focused on diversity and inclusion. I've also consistently published on the outcomes for women, African Americans, and Hispanic Americans in engineering disciplines, including MSc. In 2007, I testified in the Indiana State Legislature as a part of a successful effort to stop an anti-gay marriage amendment until the Supreme Court made the point moot. In 2011 to 2015, I worked at IIT, Illinois Institute of Technology, private university in the South Side of Chicago, that was founded to welcome people that weren't welcome at other universities in the 1890s. Just some metrics I learned from IIT. They graduated the first African-American chemical engineer, the first US woman to get a PhD in mechanical engineering, and also the first African-American PhD in our field, PhD in metallurgy from 1950, Dr. Frank Crossley. I had the privilege of co-instigating efforts in MSc to have Dr. Crossley finally recognized for his impact that resulted in a TMS award that is given in his honor, and him being selected just before his death as a fellow of TMS. Before UMBC, I spent 2 years as a dean at San Francisco State University, a minority serving institution, and in some measures is one of the most diverse, large university campuses in the country. The college I currently lead at UMBC is one of the top producers of African-American engineers and computing professionals among US doctoral public institutions, and that includes programs at the BS, MS, and PhD levels. Let me just give you one example. In 2019, our college at UMBC produced 347 master's degrees, and 40 of those were earned by individuals identifying as African-American, putting us at about 11.5% of all degrees. And I know we can and will do better. But to give you a rough benchmark, let's consider doctoral public universities surrounding the Detroit area. Detroit's kind of important today for some reason. And it's a region that's also important to the materials community and has the 5th largest population of African-Americans in the US. UMBC in 2019 produced more MS degrees in engineering that were earned by African-Americans than the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, the University of Michigan, Dearborn, Michigan State University, Wayne State University, and Oakland University combined. Those 4 institutions reported over 1,900 master's degrees, but only 32 were earned by African-Americans. That was 1,900 engineering master's degrees. How about our community? How about the material science and engineering community in 2019? We reported 1,230 master's degrees to the American Society for Engineering Education, but only 23 of those degrees were earned by individuals identifying as African-American. Let me say that again, that's 23 total, or 1.9%. The bachelor's degree level is only slightly better. I'm not here to brag about UMBC because we really believe we can do better, but I'm here to express my concern and also the belief that I know the MSc community can do better if it truly commits to do so. But you have to commit to it. So let's start today. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith. I'd next like to introduce Ellen Soretta, who's the Vice President of TMS and also Division Leader of Material Science and Technology at Los Alamos National Laboratory.
Thank you so much. I'm really, as Keith said, incredibly honored to be serving on this panel and excited to engage further with the panel discussion. As was said, I'm the Division Leader for Material Science and Technology at Los Alamos National Lab. That's a Department of Energy laboratory located in the northern part of the great state of New Mexico. And I am also the Vice President for the Minerals, Metals, and Materials Society. In both of these roles, I really believe that I have the opportunity to engage, review, and perhaps even move the needle on the inclusivity within the materials profession. And to this end, today, I'm really eager to talk a bit about what we're doing with regard to moving the needle on diversity and inclusion at national laboratories. And of course, something that's really important to understand is I'm very much going to come to this with a perspective that is the DOE perspective and probably a fairly Los Alamos-centric perspective. But I'm hoping that this means that we will really be able to broaden the discussion when after these introductions. Can I have the next slide? So this is the current demographics for Los Alamos National Lab. We are an NNSA lab. Our main mission at the laboratory is one of deterrence, global security, and energy security. We're about 12,000 employees, and you can see right now what those demographics break down as far as women and men working at Los Alamos, and as far as underrepresented minorities within the population at Los Alamos. Just for comparison's sake, on this slide, we've provided the numbers of the U.S. population, and while a lot can be said about the numbers on this slide, I think probably the easiest thing to say right here is there's a lot of room to improve, at least with regard to Los Alamos, on how on what our numbers look like. And broadly, the Department of Energy is very, very supportive of this because, quite frankly, the laboratory is growing, the DOE laboratories are growing, and we need to make sure that we are recruiting not just in a glib way, the best and the brightest, but really opening the aperture and making sure that we have the deepest bench we possibly can for generating creative ideas with regard to national security. Next slide. So to do that, it becomes important not just to understand what your broad demographics are within your workforce, but it can also be helpful to understand how that divides up along the different job series you have at a facility like a national lab. And these are some of those series that you can think about within the DOE labs. And for comparison's sake, I've provided some statistics against our other DOE or sister laboratories within the United States. And so you can see how Los Alamos fares against the broader population of government labs or DOE labs. And there's a lot to pour through here, and because I don't have a lot of time, I'm not going to do that. But one thing I am going to do is point to the pipeline populations at Los Alamos. And quite frankly, for those of you on the line who are thinking about careers at a national lab, a great way to start at a national lab is as a student, whether it's an undergraduate student, a graduate student, or a postdoctoral student. That is probably the number one way to join as permanent staff at a laboratory like Los Alamos. And quite frankly, we have over 500 postdocs right now at Los Alamos National Lab from both domestically and abroad. So as we consider that pipeline population and how we can do better with regard to recruiting a diverse population and then retaining those folks at Los Alamos, I'd like to show some of the things that we've been doing lately. Next slide. So we've really been thinking about how to develop a robust set of recruitment and retention tools. I have kind of a list of both of those sets of tools on this slide, and as you start to look at them, what you'll see is they divide into kind of two categories. The first category, I would say, are just the straight HR tools. What are the best practices you can put in place to make your workplace attractive to a broad set of people within the community?
Thank you, Beth.
And then the second set of tools here are the things that all of your staff can be engaged in to help recruit and retain a fairly diverse set of staff at your workplace. And it is our hope or our thought that by doing that, by making it something that everybody can be engaged in, that's something that drives toward inclusivity. And so we'll talk a little bit about that. With regard to recruitment, we like to be able to engage with a broad set of universities. We like to sponsor diversity events. It's one of the reasons I'm on this panel in the middle of the workday. And we also offer a lot of programs on campus through our education center and through our user facility programs that are ways to give people access to the national labs and gain some comfort and some confidence with regard to how they may fit in this community. With regard to retention, of course, like I said, we have some of the HR best practices that we continue to work and refine all the time. But we also, as Carl mentioned earlier, are very engaged in providing important employee resource groups so we can continue to make sure that we are carefully reviewing what we're doing and making sure that we don't ever really think that we have completed the job in this area, that we're constantly being critical of ourselves and looking to engage in even better practices. And finally, broadly, and this is across the entire lab, something that becomes really important with regard to retention is making sure you're providing a broad set of leadership opportunities and that you are developing future leaders, because this is going to be a self-perpetuating engine, if you will. By developing a broad set of future leaders, you're going to have a robust way to recruit in the future. Some evidence that we perhaps are moving the needle a bit and that some of these things are working are that we have been named as a family-friendly employer in 2020. We have been named as a top 20 government employer by Minority Engineer, and we've been recognized with the VETS medallion in 2019. If I was presenting to you last year, I would have been saying that we were really very honored to receive the recognition from Winds of Change magazine as a top 50 government employer for Native Americans, which is an incredibly important population within New Mexico, and you can imagine makes us somebody who really needs to be, or a group that really needs to be thinking about how to be inclusive with the Native American populations within the state, and that we were recognized as a top 50 employer for Latino women. Next slide. And then getting back to maybe one statistic you might want to look at with regard to whether or not we are doing things to create future leaders within the profession. One thing that we're constantly monitoring are the number of awards, particularly external awards our staff are receiving. And while this isn't broken down versus demographics of the staff at Los Alamos, what you can see is how important the pinnacle awards that professional societies give are to us being able to measure whether or not we are growing future leaders within our staff populations. And these are the kinds of awards that you see us monitoring constantly as one barometer for whether or not we're getting things right. With that, I'll kind of stop talking and hand it over to the next person.
Thank you, Ellen. I'd like to introduce our final panelist who is representing AIST. This is Mark Brooks, who is in charge of talent acquisition. He's a talent acquisition specialist at Nucor Corporation. Mark.
Thank you. While I'm here to represent AIST, I'll talk briefly around Nucor and our role in manufacturing and production of steel. As it says in my bio, I came out of school with a bachelor's degree in finance, and while most folks here on the material science world, I've had that experience allow me to work overseas in different countries, which really broaden, when you think about D&I, is broadening that experience and those your horizons. As a young person, I worked. My father was in the military, so I lived overseas, which I think started that really that growth and development into learning about cultures and the importance of inclusion and diversity around our globe. And so at Bank of America, I was able to work in Brazil and England and Canada and just learn around cultures and how they're important and affect organizations and profitability and all those things that Keith mentioned earlier. At Nucor, working in talent acquisition, I'm directly responsible for a lot of the hiring and how we, as I call it, open up the funnel to bring in talent from around the United States and abroad. I truly believe that the wider you can open up the funnel and have access to students that represent different populations and mindsets and experiences, the better your organization is when you attract those folks on your teams. Looking at Keith's presentation earlier, it talked a lot around bringing in those different viewpoints at different parts of the organization, and being responsible for that is a heavy lift. And I'm really happy that the efforts we're making at Nucor and AIT does the same things as they continue to promote the business of steel and manufacturing around the globe. We'll go to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about Nucor in particular, and then we'll talk about AIT at the end. And so Nucor is being the largest manufacturer of steel recycler in North America as well. And what I'm happy to say there is that within the last several years, as we heard around Los Alamos, we too have made some tremendous strides within D&I. Bringing our first female EVP onto our ranks was a really big move for Nucor. We've been around 67 years, and over the last 3 years, we've seen our first female executive. We've also seen our first, second, and third GMs of some of our plants around the country that are African Americans. This has really helped our profitability. It helped our teammates from across the organization see pathways to leadership. We're an organization of over 27,000 teammates, and while we have different levels within the organization, it's relatively flat, really 4 levels of hierarchy within Nucor, from someone that's in operations up to the CEO, and we have representation at every level, which is really important to see how we do that and how those viewpoints can make a difference. We'll go to the next slide, and I won't belabor this long talking about us so we can get into the panel discussions. We talk about our footprint, and here you see really some of the challenges that organizations face when they're looking at diverse product mix as well as diverse hiring and D&I practices. Sometimes location makes a difference. Where you're located may hinder the population that you can hire. We just heard around Los Alamos and them bringing in the Native American population. That's a direct result of where they sit. And so some of our locations have higher, what I would call challenges in order to attract diverse talent. When we look at the map here of some of our steel mills, that presents challenges of bringing in diverse individuals, but we learn to be intentional in how we do those things and how do we attract that talent in order to overcome those obstacles that are out there based on just the locations and where our facilities sit. And what I would say is that if you're not intentional with the efforts, you'll fall behind. And that's one of the things that I'm responsible for, is being intentional as we recruit, as we hire, and then those tracks and that inclusion piece is being very intentional how we do those things to make sure that our teammates are receiving all the support that they need. We heard around mentoring and all these other things that a lot of we'll talk about today. Those things play a huge part even in industry as you bring in professionals in order to help them navigate a successful career. And then we'll go to the final slide. I think as you look at organizations and educational facilities and some of the principles will guide some of the people you attract. At Nucor, we have a principle: safety first. Above all things, safety first. And if you think around safety, there's many things that apply to safety, not only on the job, but when you go back home and when you are traveling into and how you work and how you work smarter with others. Safety first. Teamwork is something that we value tremendously. We don't have employees, we have teammates. And so when you look at everyone as a teammate, it really helps you in your interactions. And so that's something that we strive to do and continue to do as an organization. Pay for performance, continual improvement, and environmental stewards are some of the things that we practice and believe in heavily. If you look at the pictures, this is a really good representation of who we are as an organization and who we're continuing to striving to be one of the most inclusive organizations, especially around manufacturing in the country. So with that, I'll turn it over so we can start our panel discussions.
Thank you, Mark. I'd like to invite Dr. Carl Reed back to join the panel, and we will start to discuss and answer some of the questions. So those of you that are listening, please go ahead and use the Q&A box to ask questions for the panel. And Carl, if you could come back and join us. Great. Okay, great. Thank you again to all of our panelists. What an esteemed group of people. We're so fortunate to have you in our community, and it's truly inspirational to hear everyone's words and all that you've done through your professional careers. It is quite an inspiration. So let me open up with one question, and a few of these come in around the idea of hiring, or maybe we can think of recruiting if it's more of an academic setting. So, and some of these may be difficult questions and complex. First one is, in an organization that typically views its hiring process as quote unquote merit-based, how can it be clarified that boosting diversity through recruitment does not involve or be perceived as involving deviation from a merit-based hiring process? Keith, you're muted.
Yes, I'm here. So I think that there's a couple of things. First off, Carl talked about implicit bias. So we know that if you take the same resume or curriculum vitae for someone, that if you change the gender or if you change the obvious ethnicity of the name or characteristics, research shows that people are discriminatory and make a choice. And implicit bias affects that. We also know it affects reference letters. Reference letters, for example, by gender and also by race and ethnicity will often take on different character. There's also research that shows that. So if your merit is considering just those things and assuming we're objective, right? I think the real presumption is, how do you objectively establish merit? And if you think that you're completely objective, then you're probably wrong.
That's a brilliant response, and I think Jennifer Eberhardt has published a book just recently about bias, and a faculty member at Stanford University has done a lot of work on bias, even in policing and faculty and other kind of dimensions, and she cites a lot of those studies. So there is also this false dialectic, right, between diversity and quality. Right. And what we want to kind of get out of is this whole notion that if I increase my diversity, I will challenge my quality of the organization. And what Scott Page at University of Michigan has done is shown that when you actually have diversity, you have bonuses. You actually can solve more complex problems and challenge, and you're better as a result of it. So getting kind of out of that mindset of, in addition to what Keith talked about, and this whole notion of eliminating bias and making that system one thinking, system two thinking, but also kind of even challenging that fundamental notion that if I increase this, I'm going to hurt that.
Maybe adding to that comment, I think one of the things that I guess I would encourage all search committees, all hiring institutions to do is it's really, really easy actually to do this by merit. And it's kind of a cop-out, right? Is that anyone can look through a CV and count publications and patents and, you know, what you really should be doing is judging potential. And that's much, much harder. And it means you have to push those around you to really think about that. And not be afraid of it, because in a lot of the jobs that are being offered today, quite frankly, we're going to train you anyway. You're not coming with all the skills that I need. And so I'm already signed on to the idea that I'm going to have to develop this person to have all the skills I need in their profession. So why wouldn't I judge potential, and rather than just counting things on a CV?
one of the things I didn't mention before in my intro is that prior to Nucor, I worked at the director at a company called Inroads. And Inroads is an organization that's celebrating their 50th year anniversary today. And what they do is they really open up opportunities for underserved students to have access to corporate careers through internships and job placements. Well, one of the principles of that is everyone goes through the same process. And Ellen just mentioned that, 3.0 GPA, you have to go through these steps, these vetting steps in order to get access. And so if you look at it, everyone goes through the same thing. It's just a matter of opportunity. It makes a huge difference when those opportunities are presented. And so when you present additional opportunities, it takes away that notion that you're watering down anything. And then even at Nucor, we have, if you look at on a production side and not our professional side, most of our operations are ran on 4 shifts. You have an A and a C crew that work closely together, and a B and a D crew that work closely together. And they're incentivized based on performance, based on how much they produce, the quality of what they produce, and does it meet the customer needs. Well, it doesn't matter what my C, if I'm an A guy and my C guy or girl is, we're competing for the same thing. We're performing for a reason. If you look at our incentive, it is goal-oriented. And so I'm doing everything I can to work closely with this person because we are on the same team going towards a common goal. Whatever things that are getting in the way, we're going to get those things taken care of so that we can have those produced results. That's how you look at sports, is one of the analogies of people that come together because you have a common goal. And when you have that, it really helps you work through a lot of those differences that you may have.
Thank you. Important insights.
I'd like to add just one more thing that has to do with keeping in mind that it's not just about trying to eliminate bias and in some form, way, shape, or form, getting candidates into an interview. And this could be industry or academia, right? You're looking at CVs and you do something and you somehow then get your candidates and they come and visit. I think that the experience of visiting is also very important at an academic or an industrial setting. If it is perceived as a negative environment, that's going to be very off-putting for potential employees of color. In academia, in particular, where we have this attitude that they can throw questions at us and you're going to have to just sort of take it, is not the right attitude for hiring a faculty of color in general. I would say it's not a good attitude to have, period. There's a study on interview practices and in particular the interview presentation that was done by a professor at UC San Diego in the Electrical and Computer Engineering department, and she looked at several different universities recording the presentations of the candidates for assistant professor. And this is out there. This is a published piece of work that shows that women, she was doing it by gender, men, women. Women get interrupted more. The questions are more aggressive. And so if we want to make sure that we hire diverse faculty or diverse employees in general, I think that we need to also think about the whole interview atmosphere.
Thank you, Olivia. Great points. And I think it does point to the need for all of us to be aware of these types of studies that are done, evidence-based based practices that need to be developed are very important. Let me move on to another question, which is dovetails, I think, a little bit with what we've been discussing. And this is questions about related to small businesses. So small businesses who may have lower visibility, how do they approach building a diverse team? Because larger companies may have the benefit of large candidate pools to select from, but startups and small businesses more often need to find their own candidates, and the lack of personnel for large marketing recruiting efforts. So what advice do we have for smaller businesses in our community?
I think they should get involved with their local university and participate in efforts and programs, because then it gives them direct access to the students, and they can start really looking at opportunities for hiring. They're not gonna, as small businesses, they're not gonna be hiring 10,000 employees a year, but 2 or 3 key people that they may be hiring, depending on the size of the small business, say, a 50 employee per company. If you are with feet wet at your local university campus, or maybe 2 or 3, depending on where you live, I think that you're going to have the opportunity to find some very excellent opportunities for hiring. So you cannot ignore the participation aspects of being a small business that is next door, or maybe just a few miles from a university campus that is graduating students. Thanks.
Yeah, I sat in on a diversity panel at CES last January when we had a CES in person. And one of the panelists talked about, she was a founder of a small business startup, and all of her co-founders and friends came from the same university, and there were 7 of them. And she said the real difficulty was introduced when I had to hire the 8th employee. And that's when I had to reach out of my network to really bring that news. So it's always in my mind about that 8th employee with small business. And it might be the 80th employee, it might be the 12th, et cetera. You're kind of bringing somebody in outside of that network and challenging in that homophily that I talked about, that Brett Pelham talks about as well. So I think in addition to Olivia's point about connecting with local college and university, is connecting with our engineering societies. So the many societies that are represented here in the organization, the diversity engineering societies like SWE, SHIP, ACES as well. We have a program that we started in 2016 called the Integrated Pipeline Program, where companies can form relationships with students as early as their sophomore year. So it's basically the Northeastern University co-op model, but we did it within our university, within our organization. And these companies form relationships, they have mentoring, they have professional development, and in fact, in some cases, scholarships, so that the students can really contribute to the company, as well as learn the industry. And I'm a product of that. I used to run the engineering internship program at MIT, and I could see how students come away from that experience much more purposeful in doing. In fact, Los Alamos was one of our partners, and I had the privilege of spending some time out there and sending interns there. So those are the ways, in addition to Olivia's point about the universities connecting with the engineering societies and the other societies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great point, because certainly all of our 3 organizations represented, the MS&T organizations, have a lot of small and mid-sized companies that are important to the to those professional organizations, and we're working hard, I know, in ACERS, and I'm sure TMS and AAST, to help be that conduit and give our small companies the ability to connect with a more diverse talent pool. Okay, great.
So I was going to mention also that there's been an opportunity out of the pandemic. Many of our student organizations are used to being able to attract students to their events by pizza. So it turns out they're even more interested than normal in having speakers, and the speakers don't have to travel. So there has been, particularly this year, there are student orgs that would really love to have speakers from any size company. So.
Got another question. So this is changing topics a little bit. Can our panelists comment on the role of minority serving institutions in this country, and what are we doing well and what are we not doing well with our minority serving institutions in helping us attract, educate, and train the next generation workforce?
Yes.
We'll do Carl, then Olivia.
Quickly, I used to run the United Negro College Fund's Institute for Capacity Building. So we would provide capacity, grants and technical assistance at HBCUs. And when I came over to NSBE, the reason we started the integrated pipeline program is because one of the companies, Northrop Grumman, already had relationships with 3 of the HBCUs, but they were not getting enough students into their internship program. And we said, that's fine. NSBE is on every single HBCU campus. Why don't we develop sort of an integrated partnership? So we've got now the HBCU, we've got NSBE, the NSBE local chapter, and the company providing the internships and scholarships, et cetera, and they were able to satisfy. We had 72 students come in over a 3-year period into their pipeline as well. HBCUs, and I don't remember all the stats, but they historically Black colleges, and I'll let Elizabeth talk about the broader MSI community, produce something in the order of 20 to 25% of all Black engineers the nation's colleges and universities produce. That's from only 15 HBCUs that are ABET credited. So they do really the heavy lifting. And the question is, what are you doing to kind of build the connection with these institutions? And how can you actually help them build capacity, much like Google has done, to actually inform some of the curriculum to better prepare students for their industries as well? So not just extracting students or tapping the talent, but also partnering with them so that you can get to sort of a win-win and broaden the pool much in a greater fashion.
Olivia.
I think some of my comments are connected definitely to what was just said. And the main comment that I have is there is absolutely no question that HBCUs and HSIs have been tremendously successful in promoting the formation of not just undergraduate engineers or other fields, but also at the PhD level. If you think about the numbers of Black PhDs coming out of HBCUs that have PhD programs, and HSIs that have Hispanic serving institutions that have PhD programs. And the question then is why? The numbers are clear. So the question is why? Why are they so successful? And as a woman, a Latina of color, I can tell you that if you show up to a campus and it is, you are the one Latina in a classroom of 100 students, that is intimidating. It's the imposter syndrome that we're well aware of, and for which there are plenty of studies describing the reasons and the psychology of all this. Those institutions, HBCUs, HSIs, and Native American serving institutions, for example, they are avoiding that issue, right? By bringing people of the same color, and it's not about excluding people. It's about including people and providing that environment that is actually going to make them succeed. And so, how can we do that in an institution that is not an HBCU, for example? How can we promote that kind of environment? It's actually, to me, the more important question. How can we learn from those HBCUs and HSIs and implement in our own institutions? And I think, to me, the answer to that, or at least one of the answers, is build those clusters of communities that allow students to have their space. So safe spaces in a college campus, which is per se predominantly white campus, those places are really critical. NSBE and SHIP and ACES and SACE and SWE, all of those create that kind of safe space. And I think that what we need to do is to make sure that they are really being served the right way, because it gives the that big, gigantic campus that one little section that makes it feel like an HSI, that makes it feel like an HBCU, for example. That's my comment.
And I can speak to that a little bit. I had the unique experience of attending both years ago when I was in school, starting at UNC Charlotte and then finishing at Fayetteville State. And one of the things that I know that UNC Charlotte did is they had a program that brought in diverse students in the second summer prior to the fall of their once they graduated from high school, and they paired them together. And it was called UTOP, University Transition Opportunity Program. And what that did is it kind of gave you a leg up to start off your collegiate career. And you got a chance to meet folks that were exactly what Olivia said, that were familiar. You got a chance to meet faculty and staff and resources at a collegiate campus. And several of my colleagues from Utah are engineers and things of that nature, and all have done well. If you look at just the graduation rate, I think we sit at 97% of our Utahers that graduated from school, and it was because of that community in the beginning. And now, of course, you can't stay in that bubble, right? You have to be able to broaden out, but what it does is it gives you that baseline. It gives you that support system that you need in order to do different things. And I just distinctly remember on campus at a UNC Charlotte where I think the minority population when I was there was around 8%. Anytime you saw someone that looked like you would go out of your way and, you know, kind of wave and just that sense of familia was there. But going to a HBCU, it was a different experience because it was more of the, I call it the hugging. They hugged you a little bit more. They brought you in and provided those things that you may not have received on a larger campus. And what that does is it for the students that need it, it gave them the confidence, and it gives them the confidence and prepares them to move forward. And as an organization, if I pivot to Nucor, we specifically target universities and organizations that are diverse in order to increase our bandwidth, because you don't know what you don't know. And I think the more you can open up and include as many people as possible, you will become a better organization. And we partner with Tuskegee. We're going to do something with Region 3 at NSBE this year in order to continue to attract that engineering talent to the organization, because we do see that the value to inclusion is a lot more than exclusion.
Okay. Any other thoughts from our panelists?
So I'll just make one comment. So campus-based cohort programs, the Meyerhoff Scholars Program at UMBC is one example, but there are many examples out there. It's been replicated at Penn State, University of North Carolina, and then it's in the process of being replicated in its own form at Berkeley and also at UCSD. But cohort-based programs that create a microclimate and an ecosystem, and I would argue that many of these actually are modeled after what happens in minority-serving institutions in terms of creating a family sense and creating a sense of community and that network of people, including mentors from outside who are already successful. All those pieces really come together and can really at least create more of a hug environment to support people and make sure they feel they belong to at least some element of the campus.
Yeah, the word. Oh, go ahead, Ellen. I'm sorry.
I think these become incredibly important when you're at a very large facility where it can be easy to get lost. And I think it can also become one of the things I've seen where I am, because of course we're in a remote environment, right? I grew up in New York, and when I came to Los Alamos, I thought I fell off the end of the earth. And I think it's something that can be a real home away from home when you come to a place that can be a little strange and in a remote place.
Yeah, I was just going to just point out this whole an ethic of care. So Mark called it a hugging, but I think some have called it an ethic of care. This feeling, and I have been to UMBC, and so it's not just at historically Black colleges and universities, MSI, but institutions like UMBC have been able to sort of replicate this ethic of care. People feel that sense of belonging once they're there. In fact, when I was at MIT, we modeled some of our programs very much so after the Meyerhoff Scholars Program that Freeman Hrabowski had led. Basically, just to be very quick, it's horizontal and vertical integration. So in other words, people will stay to the degree to which they are connected vertically and connected horizontally. Connected vertically to their manager, to their faculty member, to their administrators, et cetera, and horizontally to their peer network. And so being intentional about creating that, regardless of whether it's a campus or a workplace or a home, as it were, you're actually kind of building in that sense of inclusion and that sense of sustainability and belonging that's created. So that has to be intentional. Otherwise, it just won't happen in many cases.
Okay, great. Thank you. Great discussion. So I'm going to try to meld a couple of points together here that I think that have come in the chat. You know, one was, I don't see it any longer, so I'm going to try to paraphrase as best I can remember, is, you know, being in an organization which is not very diverse and you're an individual, maybe not in a position of power or perceived power, who wants to make a difference, right? And then there's another comment about kind of focusing on, you know, how to move the needle. You know, is it one person, one relationship, one conversation at a time? And I think a lot of people struggle with wanting to do something, but not knowing how to do it because there's not a big effort or they're not in a position of power. And maybe this will tie into the end of the program too, where we're going to talk a little bit about what the professional societies are trying to do. But some comments about that, you know, doing the one person, one conversation at a time, and is that important, and how important is that in this whole process?
Well, I mean, so I have a couple of comments on that. We all start in positions of non-power. So it's not an unknown for anybody that you would be in this position. Perhaps the kind of person that you are would allow you to move more quickly and acquire power, or perhaps not. And so in that sense, what I mean is, if you are a Black chemical engineer in academia, maybe that's going to, or a woman of color, a Latina like myself, maybe you're going to find biases that won't allow you to move as fast as others. But I think that generally I can say that we all start in a position of pretty much non-power, and then the question is how to acquire it. And it has been my view throughout my career that you acquire it by in baby steps, by implementing programs that you value and that you think are important, without going crazy in terms of the size, because you don't want to overwhelm yourself. And then, so if you start something small and it becomes successful, then it's like the next one and the next one and the next one. I'm going to just give one example of that. When I started my Enlace program, my summer research program that I spoke about earlier, of which I have now over 200 students in it every year. So it's a very large summer research program. I don't call it an REU because it also includes high school students, but it is a typical REU, except it includes both levels. And I started in 2013 when I arrived at UCSD with 5 students. It's like, let me do this. I want to bring students from Mexico, the complexities of the visa situation, all of that. 5 students. Within 7 years, it was 200. So baby steps to give you confidence and to show the people above you that you know what you're doing, that you can do this, that you are good at it. And it just, and if you have the right, if your heart is in it because you truly believe in this and you're not doing it because somebody tells you that you have to have outreach in your dossier, then it shows the heart in the right place and the commitment to get something done in small steps so that eventually they grow into this, I call it the seed. It's a little seed that grows into a wonderful tree over a sustained effort year after year. That's my comment.
Thank you, Olivia. I think that gives people hope. So that's great. Mark.
Yeah, I'd say a couple things. Those one-on-one individual conversations are very important. I recently had a conversation with a teammate. He's actually from Russia, and he just asked the question, Mark, what's going on in our country today? You know, and we had a discussion around things. He had a viewpoint, and it was important for me to listen to his viewpoint. He had his own challenges being Russian and having those biases, and I have my own challenges because of what I look like and the things that I've experienced. And how I equate that is honest and open dialogue, learning to listen as well as to try to have empathy to the viewpoint that he has and explain that your viewpoint in a way that can be understood. And what you don't understand is almost like a goose, I call it a goose down pillow. So you have those feathers, and Olivia talked about the seed. My conversation with that gentleman has now spread. And I don't know how many times he'll take what we talked around and spread that out to so many other people, and it'll impact them. And so having that one-on-one conversation can be extremely impactful when you have those. And I wouldn't shy away from them, but I would also not shy away from listening to that other person and their point of view. I think it's very important that you consider their experiences to be just as valid as yours. And then finally, something that we're doing at Nucor is that we're taking these small conversations and we're recording them, and then we're presenting them in levels to our management teams in order to them to understand. First, listen before you make an opinion. Before you, well, I wouldn't do that. Well, this is not you. We're talking from someone else's experience. You have to learn to accept that experience and not necessarily question why someone thinks that way. Your job is to listen. And so we're doing that. We're doing almost town hall sessions, and we're going and helping educate our leaders on what listening looks like, and not projecting your position of authority on others, because your viewpoint is not necessarily my viewpoint, and both are valid, right? Both are valid as long as they're not dangerous and divisive. And so those are some of the things that I think folks can do as an individual is not be afraid to have those conversations and listen at the same time.
Great, Mark. That actually answers another question. Part of the question is just that you addressed the value of first listening and how important that is. So there's other good questions. We're having lots of good conversation, but I do need to actually thank our panelists for their participation, because we're not done with the program. We have